Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here for Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus. We'll be together for the next couple of hours here, taking a look at the latest with breaking news, live feeds, and also some in-depth coverage that we can't always bring to you on TV. So we're so glad you're joining us here on this streaming platform, WCNC+. We want to start off with a national headline that we're seeing coming to us from Northern California, and it's the wildfires that are burning. And this has really been devastating in the sense that it's forced a lot of evacuations. We know that there's also been some destruction to an historic gold mining town, so some history that's been destroyed as well. You're actually looking at some images from the air from Chinese camp in Northern California. And so this was an area that was settled in the 1850s by thousands of Chinese miners. Just one of the impacts we're seeing from these fires. We want to get a little bit more context, though, to the situation. Joining now with Becca Habegger from our sister station up there in Northern California. Becca, thanks so much for your time and for joining us to really kind of set the scene for how much of a deal this is for the community, the impacts. And from what we understand, these are multiple fires, right, that are burning kind of in a complex.
Yeah, that's right. CAL FIRE is the agency within the state of California that oversees fires and fights fires at the state level. CAL FIRE says this is a mix of 22 separate fires. They call these lightning complex fires. So the technical name for this event is called the the TCU September complex fires. 22 different fires, all started by lightning. We had a storm roll through overnight Monday into Tuesday. In fact, statewide, there were some 9,000 lightning strikes. So you can imagine we have had fuels drying out throughout the summer. We've had high heat. With those storms came some erratic winds. And so lightning strikes, dry lightning, as our meteorologist calls it, not a lot of rain to stop any kind of fire that those might start. And so it really is just a recipe for disaster. That's how you see 22 separate fires converging together. They're not fully converged, but there's so many spot fires that have been caused by the same storm that CAL FIRE went ahead and named it a lightning complex fire. That's what we're seeing burning right now.
Now, just a few moments ago, we were seeing some images from Chinese camp, and we alluded to the fact that there was some destruction of historic elements in Northern California. Are you able to kind of shed some light on that, aspect of the impacts? Tell us about Chinese camp if you're able to, and what other maybe historic features have been destroyed because of this fire.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for geographic context, Chinese camp is about 40 miles west of the entrance to Yosemite National Park. To be clear, Yosemite National Park is not threatened by this particular complex fire at this point. But going back to Chinese camp, as you said at the top of the show, this is a historic gold rush era town settled in the 1850s. Thousands of Chinese migrants came and settled here. You're seeing images of some of those historic buildings. As of the 2020 census, there were approximately 100 people living in there in this community, so not a huge community, but certainly some family homes. My colleague was in Chinese camp last night, and he actually was on a phone call with some evacuees who asked him, please, can you go look at our property and tell us whether our home is standing? And very tragically, he was able to give them information, but it was bad news. Their home had burned, their car had burned, their shed had burned. So certainly, not only family homes and structures, but also some historic buildings. There aren't many left in Chinese camp, but one of them is a post office dating back to the 1850s, and that post office was lost. There is some, I guess, silver lining in that a historic school built in the 1970s, but in the pagoda style, paying homage to Chinese camp's roots. That elementary school is still standing. It was spared in the fire, but a lot of destruction. And of course, there's a long road to recovery for folks living in these areas. Even if their home is still standing, many of their neighbors will be displaced. Their community resources will be perhaps take a long time to come back. And so this is going to be, a tough recovery process for folks in that community.
So, here on the East Coast, as we cover natural disasters across various regions of the nation, I think about how unfortunately, a lot of the imagery that we see from California has to do with, wildfires. And I know here, growing up on the East Coast, I feel like, I'm steeped in hurricane response, if you will, and preparedness. And, we talk about tornadoes. And so, I mean, that's kind of a way of life here for us, where we live in the Carolinas. But I'm just kind of curious to hear your take as someone who lives in Northern California, who's seeing, these images and obviously is living there as well in these communities. What is it like? I mean, is this, just part of a way of life here, just to know that a wildfire can happen at any moment?
Yeah, we say in California that wildfire season now is year round. It used to be sort of kind of early to midsummer into late fall. And now, I mean, you recall from earlier this year, the LA wildfires, those sparked in January. And so we are, as Californians, statewide, acutely aware that fire can strike and spread depending on the conditions, really at any time of the year. A lot of Californians, especially those who live in rural areas, the foothills of the Sierra, know to have a go bag packed with some valuables, with family heirlooms, for example. Oftentimes, not always, but folks will have a bit of a warning, a bit of a heads up. And if you live in an area, you kind of know, okay, I'm going to gather the things that typically go in my go bag. And when this evacuation warning turns into an evacuation order, I'm going to get out of here with my pets and hope that my home is standing when I come home. I mean, that's the tragic reality that lots of folks face. I will also make a note too about, kind of the firefighting conditions. A lot of these fires spark in very remote areas. And so the fire attack is very difficult for fire crews. You have some ravines and mountains and creeks, and this is not just a flat field, of course. And so you have air attacks by CAL FIRE ground crews. Just in the last few years, we've been able to bring online overnight firefighting helicopters. So those pilots have specially trained to use like night vision as they fly the helicopters and can do water drops, all in the service of trying to attack the fire, especially overnight when the moisture comes up a little bit and you can make perhaps more progress overnight on these fires. And so, we are just entering, though, right now, going back to your original question, into a time where while wildfire season is indeed year round, this is really the height of it. I spoke with our chief meteorologist just about an hour ago, and she pointed out we really haven't had a whole lot of consistent moisture here in Northern California and the Central Valley since late March. And since then, the fuels have been drying out. And this is the third of 3 consecutive good to average water years, which means there is a lot of vegetation that has grown, and that a lot of vegetation has been drying out these past, many months, 5-6 months. And so right now, all it takes is literally a spark, as we saw overnight Monday into Tuesday, to cause these fires. And with the erratic winds from thunderstorms, they really can take off. So having that go bag ready for folks in wildfire prone areas is very important this time of year. And it's a reality we live with as Californians.
And I'm just curious too, if y'all have had any chances to speak directly with firefighting crews or, representatives with CAL FIRE. I'm just curious how they feel in the sense of like, do they feel like they have enough resources and enough staffing to address all that's coming? Because I feel like it was, within the last several weeks when we were last talking about wildfires, how there was kind of like a highlighting of this, I think it was like a prison cooperative where they were having inmates fight fires and it would count towards their time served. And it was because they just needed more people, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's the inmate crews are an essential part of firefighting. But of course, we have many professional firefighters here. I think the most recent count that I saw is more than 600 firefighting personnel on the ground right now fighting this complex fire, ground and air resources. Of course, like we talked about with this lightning complex fire being a mix of 22 different fires, they're close-ish by, but they are still spread out. And so that means you have resources on each of those 22 fires. And keep in mind that the complex fire is not the only one burning in California right now. I checked CAL FIRE's statewide incident map just a few minutes ago, and there are about 24 fires burning up and down the state right now, of varying sizes, of course, and at varying levels of what we call containment. Of course, you want to get to 100% containment, but this lightning complex fire, for example, is at 0% containment right now. So a lot of resources are being applied there. The governor's office put out a press release yesterday saying the state has received a grant from FEMA to bring in more firefighting resources. And of course, here in the West, there's a lot of mutual aid. If things get to a certain level, we've brought in firefighters from, I believe, like Alaska and Oregon and all throughout the West, Washington. And likewise, we will deploy, we as Californians, our firefighting forces to those states when they need it. So resources are definitely stretched, but this is not something that we have not dealt with before as a state. And of course, we just hope that the weather conditions are such that they are conducive to firefighting. If those winds pick up, if the temperatures rise during the day, if the brush is already dry, there's no undoing that. But it also depends on whether we get if another storm passes through. Is there a lot of rain in that storm, or is it more dry lightning? So those are the things our meteorologists here at ABC 10 and statewide are looking at as we see the progress of this fire.
Now, the other question I was, just thinking about just now was, we had alluded to before the fact that there were evacuations involved with these fires. And as someone, once again, East Coast, I think about when we ever have to evacuate for a hurricane, they're usually designated shelters where they know this is an area that's reasonably safe from, the wind and flooding elements of a hurricane, for example. Where do folks go? Where are they going when they have to evacuate?
Yeah, that's a great question. That you bring up a good point, I imagine, and then tell me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to a hurricane, there are places that you consistently know are on high ground. So no matter where the hurricane strikes, there might be kind of designated safe spaces. With a fire, of course, you can't have a designated safe space because you don't know where the fire's going to be ahead of time.
Yeah.
So you might say, okay, here's the evacuation zone. Well, we're going to send folks to this high school gymnasium here. Or a lot of times they'll say, hey, you can bring your animals. A lot of folks, have horses and other livestock. You can bring that to the county fairgrounds here because those emergency crews, CAL FIRE, they know that those areas are far enough away from evacuation zones where that's a safe place to go. So yeah, everything from high school gymnasiums to Red Cross shelters, or I guess the Red Cross sets up in these areas, but community centers, and kind of, I'm sure, like similar to hurricane shelters, there's cots set up, food, resources, internet, places for folks to charge their phones. And just having covered fires in my 8 years here in California, those evacuation centers are often very stressful times. People are wondering whether their home is still standing. They're wondering if they had to leave quickly, if the family dog or the family cat who wasn't around, they had to leave as the flames were looking at their doors. If the family pet's still around, and so it's it can be a very stressful time. And there are folks too who go stay with family. Let's say they have someone else who lives elsewhere in the state. And CAL FIRE is good at getting out the word. And we, as a news organization, we help spread that, hey, if you're in the evacuation zone, you can go to site A, B, or C as your evacuation shelter.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, because that was exactly what my question was, in the sense that with a fire, you probably you can say with certainty that a fire couldn't come to wherever you're evacuating to, but sounds like it's more of like a distance from the issue point, if you will, as far as how it gets selected. Anything as far as like what comes next? I know it sounds like there's still a lot of containment that needs to come with these fires. Anything that you're looking for, your team is looking at, to come as far as updates from officials, maybe tonight or in the coming days?
Yeah, well, just, in terms of human impact, of course, as this goes, we're looking to see how many buildings were impacted. At this point, we have not heard any reports of injuries. When it comes to firefighting, of course, the people who live in these communities can be injured, or even in some cases fatality, sadly, but also firefighters can be injured. And so we haven't heard any reports so far of that. So we're keeping our ears out for that. Checking to see, what the wind is doing. That really, the wind is a huge literal driving factor of these fires. And another reason why they would pick a certain evacuation zone, they can see the fires going in a different direction. So there's some confidence in, okay, we're going to put the evacuation zone in a place where the fire wouldn't head, barring some unforeseen change in the wind direction. But typically these storm systems are kind of going in a dependable way. Let me see. I have some interesting context in terms of the size of this fire. This is by no means even close to the largest fire, this complex fire that we're talking about, in terms of the footprints put all together from those 22 fires. Currently, I think it's at about 13,000, nearly 14,000 acres. Let me just make sure I have the most updated information here. CAL FIRE is good at refreshing their website. Yeah, 13,371 acres right now. For context, top 20 largest wildfires in recorded California history. The largest one, I did the math, was 5.5 times the footprint of the city of Charlotte. So we are nowhere near that now. The acreage of this fire is about 4%. Or I was looking at, I think about 7%. 7% of the footprint of Charlotte. So you can imagine that some of these runaway fires with the worst possible conditions can really take off and have a toll on human life. But just for context, we are nowhere near one of our even our top 20 largest fires. The 20 largest, so I give you the largest fire, the 20th largest was almost exactly the footprint of the city of Charlotte. So we're just at 7% of that at this point. And hopefully crews can get that contained sooner rather than later.
Yeah, hopefully so. That was some great context, by the way, and really appreciate your insights. Very knowledgeable. Clearly, I can see that this is something that y'all have gotten down to a science as far as covering, making sure that you're gathering all the information and the context for your viewers there in Northern California. So, thanks for sharing some of that with us here on Live Impact News. Becca Habegger, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Take care.